Yeah, so starting with VRC, I felt that VRC was little lengthier, especially the RCs, and the time was little less. Like 40 minutes usually is sufficient for 3 to 4 RCs, but I could myself complete only two. That was one thing, and along with that, I could complete the entire VA part. So I attempted a total of 16 questions. That is one thing. I could not go for the rest of the two RCs because the para summary were also long paragraphs. That was one thing which I felt in RCs and VRC overall part. I'd say it was not difficult. It was readable. It was easy. Someone who has a habit of reading fast will do it easily. That was for VRC. Then let's go to DILR. I feel that DILR was one of the easiest among last past 3 years almost from 2021 when I felt that it was one DI along with three LRs. This year it was almost three LRs, three DIs along with two of LRs. Those LRs were also very doable. It was hardly one was very difficult, I'd say. So around if someone is well prepared, like for 99 percentile aim and all, they will do around say around four sets for 16 questions at least attempts. That was easy, doable in 40 minutes. Quants was way easy, and at least in if you compare in slot two, then for quants, two questions were repeated from last year's paper, 2023. So one was of the simple interest, compound interest. Direct question, same to same. It was theta last year. It had come in options this year. And one was of the fruit seller. So two questions were directly repeated, no changes, nothing. Language was same, everything was same.
The paper overall was like easy to moderate for me. And if I start with the VARC section, then it was like doable. Three RCs were doable for me, and the rest of the questions were also doable. So this year we didn't get para jumbles question, but the out of context question was quite on a difficult side, I would say. Next, I would pick out DILR section because first question was very doable for me. Three were doable, and one was on the difficult side, and one was on the moderate side. Quant was, I would say that one question was repetitive. Obviously, that mangoes and bananas were a question, and the rest questions were slightly, I would say for me it was tricky because quant is for me is like uh, a quite difficult one. So I have attempted more than 40 questions. So let's see how it ends up now.
I think the questions for VARC a bit on the harder side than I expected. There were multiple options on which I spent considerable amount of time debating whether this was the right option or the harder option. Surprisingly, there were no para jumbles that I can remember. There were multiple choose the incorrect option ones, but no para jumbles as such. Additionally, now I'll go to there were 24 and the order of the questions was jumbled. There were two, three verbal ability questions followed by an RC, sprinkled with a few VA questions throughout the paper rather than RCs continuously and then VA in the end. Then additionally, one big change that I noticed in LRDI that there were 22 questions as opposed to the expected 20, and there were 5 different sets. The sets in LRDI I thought they were simple. Now I was able to get to the logic of them and they were easy to solve. And they were about simple concepts. I just feel like the concepts were rather less known concepts rather than simple concepts and difficult questions. So if you are knowledgeable about those concepts, I think you would be comfortable solving those questions in quite little amount of time. And as for quant, similarly, the questions weren't too lengthy. They were more focused on niche topics, asking about the range of your knowledge rather than testing the how deeply can you apply your knowledge regarding simple concepts. I was able to solve 12 to 13 questions in both quant and LRDI as well. So I think lengthy as this paper wasn't as lengthy as compared to the previous paper. In verbal, I attempted 16. In LRDI, I attempted 14, and there were three numerical type questions that I entered answers from based on my just quick intuition. So if I get them, good. And I was able to solve 13 questions in quant.
For VARC, I felt the RCs were easier. And it was all scattered. Means first in mocks we have that RC first and then VARC, but sorry VA. But in this, two questions from VA and then again RC and then one question from VA. It was scattered, so I got scared first. LR was easier. I was surprised that it was easier, and they kept it separate. Means DI separate and LR separate. In mocks, I have given both combined one, but this time it was separate. and it was quite easier. Quants was always an easier section for me. For VRC, I guess I have attempted 3 RCs properly, and VA, I guess five, almost five. And DILR, it was around 12 attempts, 12 questions, and for quants around 14.
If I start with VRC, I feel it was quite comparable to the previous years. It was similar, or it was on the similar lines. And if we talk about VA specifically, it was a bit easier. And delving into RC, I found it a little difficult compared to the previous years. And if I talk about LRDI section, I feel this was the easiest paper, like basic sets that one would start its preparation with. The sets were so on the basic level, basic side. And while talking about quants, I feel it was on a moderate line. Some questions were very easy to do, and some questions it was difficult to answer them, and some were time consuming. Like it was a trap. If you go on to do that question, it was almost gonna consume you 4 to 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So it was better to do other questions rather than focusing your time on that.
In VRC section, the RCs were little tricky, but the VA part was a little on easier side. So basically, I would suggest that first you read all the papers so you can get where the VA questions are and where RC questions are. Because some of the students spend their time like in the management, that how to attempt it, where to attempt. So basically, this was a thing in VARC, and the two sets were doable. But in that two RCs, the one questions were so much tricky. So I should suggest you should leave that one question if you don't want to take the risk. And after that DILR section, in DILR section it was quite doable, and that was on easy side. DI was more, but that was easier. Two sets were of 5 questions each, and two sets were of 4 questions each.